Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Cucaruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of fish and wildlife conservation in the U.S. I'm John Gassett, your co-host for Connecting with Conservation, and I'm also with the Wildlife Management Institute. Here today with my fellow co-host, Jim Cucaruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. Jim, how you doing today?
Doing good. Coming to you live from the York County Library. I'm moving around all the time. As you know, I've just moved down to South Carolina, so we're hopefully going to have good Wi-Fi because we got a really great guest that's going to educate our listeners and viewers. I've known Tom for quite some time. He's got a long history in wildlife conservation that I'll tell you about, but also works on some really cool programs. So I don't want to ruin it, but I will say welcome, Tom Decker, and thanks for being a guest. Why don't you give us a little bit first about your personal background, what you like to do personally, and then we'll get into all the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service stuff.
Well, thank you, Jim, and John, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and speak with you both. So I'm Tom Decker. I'm a certified wildlife biologist. I'm a branch manager in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Office of Conservation Investment. My background, I worked for 24 years as a state agency biologist or administrator in Vermont and Massachusetts. I've been in the Fish and Wildlife Service for 14 years. So principally working on what is the wildlife restoration, sport fish restoration grants, which are the two nuclear-powered engines that fund conservation across the country with state fish and wildlife agencies and NGO partners. So I'm a lifelong angler, hunter, trapper, gatherer, collector, scavenger. So I spend a good deal of my time outdoors with my family. I have two German short-haired pointers that help me burn off calories every single day and just enjoy connecting with nature and being part of nature. That's a big part of my lifestyle.
Well, you said the key word, connecting, right? We're connecting with conservation here. There's a million stories that we can tell, and we're going to try to tell them one by one. I don't know how long it'll take us to get to a million, but one a week. I don't know. We ought to be able to have it done within a couple of years if my math is correct. But why don't you tell us a story about how U.S. Fish and Wildlife connects with conservation? I mean, you guys, Office of Conservation Investment does so many things. Why don't you talk about some of the main things that you guys do, what you're responsible for?
Well, a large part of our funding comes from federal excise taxes paid by manufacturers on firearms, ammunition, archery equipment, angling equipment, a motorboat fuel tax, and small engines. And so a lot of that, and that, right, when I say a lot, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, just under $1.2 billion annually that goes out to state fish and wildlife agencies. And that covers a wide spectrum of things that are eligible that states can do with that money. And in terms of that connection, Jim, one of the things we fund is the National Survey on Hunting, Angling, and Wildlife Participation. And that's done every 5 years since 1955. And it really documents it's a survey of 100,000 Americans, and it really documents the importance of hunting and angling in the lives and lifestyle of the American public. And not only just how much money they spend, but how many times they go afield, who they go with, where do they go, public land, private land, how many times are they out on the water, what do they pursue, waterfowl, big game, small game, how many of them hunt with dogs. 1.1 million hunters are spending money on dogs to hunt with, retrieve game, track game, etc. And so that's really an important thing that the federal government does and shares that information regionally, tourism agencies, planning agencies, other federal agencies planning land management activities, private NGOs. So that's really a documentation nationally, largest in scope, of the importance of these activities to connect with nature and what people do. I won't say in their spare time. No one has spare time. It's what they choose to spend their time on. And that's for all of us, really. We make those choices every day. So that's a big thing we do in partnership with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies.
So, Tom, the group that you manage right now has undergone a recent name change. Forever we knew it as the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program, and those of us on the inside, of course, PRDJ, Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson, Wallop Bro. I love the names. Hate the names. Hate it when they put names together to call it a program, because it's confusing to people who don't work on the inside of conservation. It's confusing to people who do in some cases. But I really think it was timely and appropriate that the shift from wildlife and sport fish restoration, which was around from the time we started putting animals back on the landscape, and in many cases were restoration attempts, to now where we have abundance and superabundance of most of the game species. But we still have this money coming in to manage those species, and while there are some restorations that are still ongoing, most of it is management, maintenance, control, making sure hunters and anglers have access. But now it's called the Office of Conservation Investment, which I'm not sure who came up with that name, but I think that's a fantastic name to describe what this is. It's an investment in conservation in our country. So talk a little bit more about that name change and how you see that working.
So the existence of our part of the federal government came around in 1937 when Franklin Roosevelt signed the act, the Pittman-Robertson Act, and then in 1950, which we're in the 75th anniversary of the Sport Fish Restoration Act, or the Dingle-Johnson Act. And through time, we've been called different things: the Office of Federal Assistance, the Office of Federal Aid, federal grants, which meant everybody thought we just gave away money of all types, when not even realizing we're a conservation element. And wildlife and sport fish restoration are the name of the grants. They're the name of the acts. They're the name of that part of the program that is in federal law, and that won't change. But when we really looked at what do we do, what's our part of the engagement, and that engagement is there's manufacturers paying the tax. The money comes to the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a federal tax through the Treasury. And then what do we do with it? Well, we partner to fund conservation with the state fish and wildlife agencies who, under various laws and eligibility, apply for and get that money and put it on the ground. And it funds over 10,000 state biologists and technicians. And I can go through the metrics as we talk about, 36 million acres of land, 251 fish hatcheries, stocking over 1.2 billion fish. But we're partnering. And what are we partnering in? Well, we're an investment in conservation. So that, the narrative became the Office of Conservation Investment, partnering to fund conservation for future generations. And we do that in partnership with the Wildlife Management Institute, with NGO groups, with industry groups, but really linked with the state fish and wildlife agencies who are delivering the sort of the on-the-ground work that each state determines what they need to do, how much of it they're going to do, hunter education, state land management, research, inventory, monitoring, disease monitoring, the health of fish and wildlife, new restoration programs that you spoke of, John. We take that for granted because we've had about 8 decades of restoration of things that were really scarce and aren't anymore. And that's a testament, whether it's wild turkeys or pronghorn or elk, white-tailed deer, black bear, that's a testament to not only the state agencies, but the NGO groups like Rocky Mountain Elk or National Wild Turkey Federation, Wildlife Management Institute. The volunteer people, they put hard labor, money, their own contributions, landowners. They're all key in making that whole restoration formula work, as you both are well aware.
Yeah, there's two misconceptions I want to cover. One is, the money goes and can be used for anything, filling potholes by, the government or something like that. So you mentioned very specific reasons, and there's oversight, and your team does the oversight. Like a state agency, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources has, I've got this great idea for $1 million. They can't just go and spend it. They have to write it up, submit it for approval, right? And then you guys, the Fish and Wildlife OIC, will say, yes, that falls under the what you can and can't do with those excise tax dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct. They the state agencies write up. I mean, they're very well versed in this. They have staff that are trained and know all the federal nuances. But wildlife restoration, management, inventory of wild birds and mammals. It's not reptiles and amphibians. So but that's a lot of species of wild birds and mammals. There's over 500 that we fund, some of which are harvested, some of which aren't. They're just monitored for their population trends. It can include surveys of the public who are duck hunters, and what kind of season do you want, or surveys of the public on land management. But the application process is, is it for eligible activities? There are ineligible activities like law enforcement. The grant can't be just to make a profit. We're going to make $2 million. It's not that kind of grant. But assuming it meets the eligibility criteria. Now, how much of it goes to hunter ed, land management, wildlife research, recruitment, retention, and reactivation? Those are state decisions. They want to add more staff or less staff or shift. And those are hard decisions because while it's a lot of money, there's never enough money to meet the full mission of a state fish and wildlife agency. And that's just sort of the way it is in every state. But then there are field reviews, there are audits, both state audits and federal audits and that was an industry interest. They want to make sure the funding goes to what it was supposed to, conservation and the administration of a fish and wildlife agency. There is a tendency in government that there's a lot of money here and we need more roads or bridges or prisons, or there's never enough money to run all of government. But these funds are very restricted by the law to go towards conservation. And so our program plays that role in partnership. I mean, the real oversight comes at the state level. Their project leaders know what the eligibility is. Their administrators, their commissioners know how they want to fund it and actually, explain that all the time. It's a never ending. We need to explain to somebody you just can't take this $500,000 and spend it over here, wherever that may be.
So in addition to y'all, checking the boxes, making sure that that what the state application meets the criteria set forth in the grant, there's another component of that, and you haven't been a previous state agency person, and as have I. We have our critics, and I've heard before, well, this project doesn't do anything. It's just you're just wasting money, and there's another check the service does. I think the phrase, if I remember correctly, is called substantial in character and design. In other words, it can't just be a feel-good project. It actually has to have, some depth behind it. So for the folks out there that think, agencies just have free will to do whatever with this, no, there are a lot of checks and balances here to make sure that the money's spent well, spent according to what the law requires, and is substantial in character and design. Now, I was never a federal aid coordinator, so I can't tell you exactly what is substantial in character design, but it's sort of like that other thing, that the other saying that I won't mention on here, but I know it when I see it. When I see a project, it's like, yeah, this is what we should be doing. But that's got to be a tough lift on paper, for a service employee to look at and say, is this a good project or not? I mean, how's that process work?
So we have regional offices that work with up to 13 states in a region. Some have 3 or 4 states. We have project leaders. They could be fish biologists, wildlife biologists, marketers, fiscal people. And so there's a fiscal review about substantial in character and design in a scientific research project means the methodology is scientifically sound. The sample sizes are the right size. The radio collars they're buying from thousands of dollars from that company are going to work for 2 years the way they have planned. Their biologists are going to handle the animals, immobilize them, work them up, and release them, and they'll be able to get the data that they want So that's some substantiality in the research project. Now, if they're going to do a human dimension study, they're going to study, out of Pennsylvania's 900,000 hunters, they want to sample 60,000, and they're going to use this type of survey and the sampling and the methodologies there, or they're going to market to them. Are the marketing techniques they're using appropriate? It's not just, well, we're going to get some envelopes and put stamps on them and send them out today. Right? Well, that may work, but that's not substantial in character and design for the price tag you have on this project. And so it goes through that review, and sometimes there's an iteration, and that's one of the things we do is we see Missouri is doing something really, really well. Other states do that. We share the information and link them up. So find out, well, Kentucky was reintroducing elk and has this formula all worked out. Their grants are well written. It's substantial. You refer other states to them so that they, don't have to reinvent the wheel and can benefit from, some grants that actually are well designed actually fail. Well, you can learn from that. It's not, nobody wants to fail, but in anything that does, everybody else and yourself can learn from that. So we have about 90 employees who do that kind of review and work on over $1 billion worth of funding, really. But the states have very competent people and their project leaders, and so it's really collaborative. It's not pure oversight. It's more peer-to-peer engagement. It's how I would describe it.
Right. Yeah, but it's important for the listeners to know and viewers to know that there is a lot of oversight, and it can be only used for specific reasons. But there's a broad amount of reasons, and you mentioned a few of them. The wildlife, the collars that go on antelope and bear and stuff like that. I always like to tell people fish hatcheries, fishing, boating docks. You build a lot of those, but we didn't talk about yet shooting ranges, and people like conservation shooting ranges, but a lot of money from target shooters goes into the pool too. So talk a little bit about how state-run shooting ranges came about and how many of them are out there and the opportunities to go target shooting.
Yep. So I'll just quickly say states have sort of 4 types of infrastructure they can fund. Those could be fish hatcheries, which they have 251 of, and they're raising fish. Public boat launches for fishing and boating. They have over 9,000 of them. Those are infrastructure to get people on the water, lakes, rivers, ponds, the ocean. And then they have wildlife management areas, which are open to hunting, public hunting opportunity, 36 million acres. But then they have target shooting ranges, both archery and firearms. And they have, I think the count now is 861 of them. We monitor those every 6 months and update a GIS list, but the states offer them. They can be very large, next to a large urban center, get 25,000 people a year or more, or it could be a small county in West Virginia that gets several thousand people from the local community. But all that infrastructure is community-based. The public, whether they live near them or not, or travel 2 hours to get to them, the public is who really benefits from that state infrastructure, gets them out, gets them on the landscape, helps them pursue the activities of hunting, angling, boating. And target ranges have always been eligible, but there was an amendment in 2019 that actually was trying to help states plan for them, give them a better match rate of the power of the program is when I talk about a wildlife restoration grant, it's generally a large portion federal funds, 75%, but it's also 25% state funds. So a $100,000 project is $25,000 in state money. And that's the real power of the system is everybody's got skin in the game. Everybody wants this to succeed. It's not just sort of free money from the manufacturers, and the states are contributing as well. So the infrastructure, manning the ranges, the access, Wi-Fi, lighting, berms, classrooms, courses that are offered there, both for hunting, but just straight out target shooting, including competitive target shooting. That can happen there. Those are all infrastructure that states can pursue if they choose with the money. It's not all linked to Hunter Ed, but many Hunter Ed programs have what they call live fire. The participants are going to actually, shoot a 22 as part of their learning process or a shotgun. So that infrastructure is there and growing. We'll be down at the NRA Range Conference later this week doing presentations to, I think there's 200 people enrolled there about this program, about the eligibility of the funding, about some of the resources, both in communicating to the public the opportunity of fun, safe, well-designed, structured ranges. And there's been surveys that we've funded that, like the National Shooting Sports Foundation, as you well know, Jim, of what do range owners or range users really want for amenities? What makes them feel comfortable? What makes them want to come back? All that is part of understanding the human element of sort of who the customers are of the public who owns firearms and want to get them out and use them in a safe environment they feel comfortable with. So that's a big thing that actually the program through the states directing the money can actually fund in the state.
And I'd like to add, it's important that we do that and we address those needs by the public, because we've seen a reversal in the source of that funding source on the hunting and shooting side, from primarily hunter funded excise tax to target shooters. Now I think the last number I heard was close to 80% of the revenue coming in is actually not necessarily hunting revenue, it's target shooting or people buying ammunition to store and keep or whatever. They're a lot of them aren't hunters, but they're still paying the excise tax through the process of buying the equipment or buying the ammo.
Yep.
And they need a place to go.
Right. And everybody needs a place to go. And it's about 74% of the revenues coming in for the wildlife restoration are from non-hunting sources, which is principally target shooting. Yep.
I know I'm talking to two trappers, guys who know how to trap, but I believe, does Fish and Wildlife Service have trapping matters or best management practices? Does that fall under your division, or is that something you just do personally? Or
so we do award through a process called multi-state conservation grants, which is different than the amount that Maryland or Missouri is going to get from the funding. There's a national competitive program that funds surveys. The development, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has used that money to develop communication programs called Trapping Matters to wildlife professionals that explain trapping. It's can be controversial. It has its detractors, but explain it both as a management tool, as a lifestyle pursuit, why people do it, what species there are. We've also funded there a survey of trappers nationally, about 8,000. Right now, there's over 400,000 trappers in the United States. We know that from surveys through that we fund, and on average, they spend about 36 days afield. They spend a lot of time out in the woods and in the field and in the marshes. And we know that from surveys of why they trap. It's wildlife management purposes, nature appreciation, problem animal control. They help their neighbors control coyotes, beaver, animals that are depredating livestock or causing property damage, and what they call lifestyle orientation. It fits their lifestyle. We know that 95% of trappers hunt. We also know that 68% of them have vegetable gardens. They tend to live very closely to the land. They might cut their own firewood or gather maple syrup or that kind of thing. But we know a lot about them through the funds, wildlife restoration funds, through surveys about every 5 years as well. The most popular things they pursue nationally, coyotes, raccoons, and beaver. But there's about 22 species under state law that are classified as what they call fur bearers that may have an open hunting or trapping season on them during certain parts of the year.
So Tom, switch gears a little bit here. Back in the mid 2000s or so, about the time I came into director's job in Kentucky, about the same time it coincided, we started seeing folks talk about, and these are manufacturers or others talking about trying to pull some of the products out of the excise tax chain. About that time, we saw, some tackle box issues and some rods and reels and that sort of thing. So as a group of directors, we got together through the association and decided we need to figure out what's going on with these folks. And it was surprising that we held a meeting at AFWA headquarters in DC, And not one of the 5 directors in the room knew any of the 5 industry people in the room. And they were all the executive directors of the trade associations. We had no idea who they were. And we said, we got to change this. So we started a program where once a year we'd get together with them and hash out issues before they became big problems. And we always try to do that either in association with a project funded through the Wildlife Sport Fish Restoration Program or at a manufacturer's facility to see how the other half lives, so to speak. We did that for 10 years until COVID killed it. But an interesting thing that came out of that is your partner with a payer program now, which first time I heard it come up was at one of those summits. And then it's now a program where y'all are doing it nationally through the service to get people into these facilities, maybe state agency people who don't appreciate what manufacturers go through and the challenges they have, or get manufacturers conversely in the field to see where their money goes. Where does this excise tax money go? I know that's an incredibly powerful program. When you put a bear cub in someone's hands that came off an assembly line, or a manufacturing line, they really start seeing why that excise tax is important. So tell us a little bit about partnering with a payer and how that's working. And I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to take what was a boutique sort of idea and take it, big time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So as you point out, John, the recognition that in the equation of people generating this tax money that's funding conservation, the entities that are delivering conservation, they're both very busy and they're very good in their environments, but their orbits don't intersect all the time, as you pointed out. And so those early summits really highlighted that and sort of generated thought and conversation of how could you address that, get it to scale, not make it so formal and starchy people don't want to go, make it conversational and informational. And so actually back when Jim was at the National Shooting Sports Foundation, we kind of got together and started chatting about what can we do to start a pilot and get people from Smith & Wesson or Sig Sauer or Colt out with the state agencies where they're based and learn what they do, where they can talk one-on-one with the Black Bear project leader. And then conversely, get biologists who've worked in their whole career on these projects into the facility and see what the manufacturer's world has looked like, because 10% or 11% of that output, sometimes the biggest checks those companies write, are undermining or underwriting their research or their management or their land management or the 700,000 people taking hunter ed in this country. And so we started to do that. It was very popular. Group sizes were small to allow conversations. It's not every day you get to talk to the CEO of a big company or the black bear biologist who's been there for 25 years working on restoring bears and knows everything about them. So we started to do that. It grew. So today in the service, we have what's called a tactical team. We have biologists in every region assigned to this project. It's a high priority project. We do it in association with the trade associations. So National Shooting Sports Foundation, Archery Trade Association, and the American Sportfish Association, and the National Marine Boating, NMMA, boating, yeah. And so we get out with them and they get out with us. It's not something that I would say we own. It's truly something that the state agencies own, that we're all a part of. We're just sort of a conduit to get these very busy people together in these formal places. Just enjoy the day, talk to each other, spend time. They're usually day-long events. We have a website called partnerwithapayer.org, all one word, partnerwithapayer.org. There's short videos, 2 to 3 minutes, where you'll see state agency staff talking about their experiences, why the money is so important to conservation, education, land management, and CEOs realizing, because we did, as you know from those survey or the summits, John, you get people together and they're like, I didn't really know that, or I knew this, but I didn't know this other thing really funded chronic wasting disease, health. I never realized there were 24 health labs, and labs are very expensive, but if you're going to monitor white nose syndrome or rabies or CWD or whatever, you need, You need pathologists. You need veterinarians. You need really capable staff. And that doesn't appear in a one-year grant. So just getting those people out and talking about them became a formula. And I would say it's not necessarily a service program. It's an everybody program. It's something that I wish like everybody who's paying in knew, including the sportsmen and women. I mean, those licensed dollars are the match in every single grant. They're directly paying. The manufacturers are directly paying. We just can't reach all those people. So we're focusing, as you were initially, on the people who are sort of the primary people in the orbits of revenue generation and conservation expenditures. And it's been, highly successful. We're in our 6th year. We take it very seriously. And so do all our partners. There's a lot of goodwill. It's not to say that, we all agree on every single topic in conservation. That would be, I don't know if we could ever achieve that in any venue, but when it comes to what's now called the American System of Conservation Funding, it's extremely important. People should be extremely proud of it. We talk about the Wildlife Restoration Act all the time. People really don't need to know every single detail of match rates and all the financial stuff, but they should know it was actually one of the first laws in this country to actually fund at the state level conservation. The Lacey Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and other federal laws were a little bit earlier, but they didn't provide any money. This one provides money that's spent in your state, in your community, on public and private land. And it's very wide open to all species of wild birds and mammals. Many of the fish and wildlife programs that are successful are very narrowly niched to something. Endangered species, a certain species of fish. This one is one of the broadest applicable conservation programs that the federal government has. State agencies have many good ones as well. But at the federal level, this was very unique in when it was established and where it allowed states to spend the money.
Yeah. I like to tell people in a nutshell, it took that relationship between industry and the states and the Fish and Wildlife Service from a transactional relationship to a true partnership.
Yeah, that's a very good, I'd agree with that.
So, and you mentioned partnerwiththepayer.org. So that is a website that has a ton of information, not only all those videos of the manufacturers going out in the field and the agencies going to the manufacturers, but I believe there's all the national surveys, or at least the most recent national survey on there. There's data on apportionments, on how much money each state gets. So when you're listening and watching to these episodes, go to that website. You can spend an hour there. You can find out local information about how much your state gets, examples of some things that's going on by watching those videos. So appreciate all that you've done and continue to do, and you show your dedication. You mentioned you wish more people knew about it, and that's exactly why John and I started this, so we can get more people knowing about it. Your story is perfect, and it's one of a million. So we'll get to, I think that we're at number 40 or 50 or something, but we got a ways to go. But we'll get to that millionth story, and when we do, we'll have a celebration. But why don't you tell everybody else, in addition to partnerwiththepayer.org, where people can go for more information on the Office of Conservation?
That's the principal one. You can find links from there because we do have other grant programs that are related to tribes, state wildlife grants, coastal wetlands, what are called the BIG and CVA programs, which are still funded through Sport Fish Restoration, which one is CVA is the Clean Vessel Act. It actually pays for marinas and pump out stations so that boaters aren't discharging into the waters of the U.S. They have places to go where they can pump out their boats. So there's a variety of other grant programs there that are for several $100 million as well, including the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, which we co-administer with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. I didn't talk too much about recruitment, retention, and reactivation, which, as you both know, has grown in the last 10 years, where state agencies are working with NGOs and others to connect people who have done these activities but maybe have lapsed, but to introduce new people from everywhere. Just every opportunity you can to identify people and expose them and connect them to nature through some of these activities, whether it's target shooting, boating, hunting, trapping, angling, all those types of things. So that's a big part of what we have several hundred grants that do that across multiple partners, and all states and territories are engaged in that activity. Very structured, very friendly, very open, a lot of opportunities for people who have different backgrounds and are approaching maybe their personal values are, I want to eat local food. I want to eat wild food, wild source food, but I have nobody to teach me how to go hunt a turkey or a deer. Or I bought this gun and I just want to learn how to use it safely for my own, just in my house, protection. All those kind of things are funded through this program and the work of many state employees and volunteers in those associations.
Well, Tom, thanks for coming on the show, and thank you even more for leading from the front on this issue. You know, this you take care of the care and feeding of this partnership that is so important to conservation, making sure that, you know, industry and state agencies and the Fish and Wildlife Service, that three-legged stool we like to talk about, work well together. They see what the others are doing. They see the benefits in their part of the program. Conservation wouldn't happen without what you do, and we appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Keep educating these folks, and you know, let them see all the great things that we're doing with conservation in our country.
Well, I thank both of you, John, because both of you fellas early on years ago were strategic enough to be thinking about this collectively, and really the genesis of what we're building on were things we all talked about and you all planned for 5, 6, 10, 12 years ago. And it's really keeping those conversations going and keeping it at the forefront. Hats off to both you fellas for being involved in that and continuing it forward.
Well, I think with all the things going on in the world right now and in government right now, this is one shining example of the way things are done right. It's a clean program. It does great things, and it's led by good people. So we appreciate all that. To our listeners, thanks for listening to us. If you like our podcast, please subscribe to us. That helps us and helps you. You'll get notices of when our next ones drop. Visit the Office of Conservation Investment website. It's on the screen there. See what all the great things are done with that funding that you help pay for. If you're a purchaser of firearms, ammunition, archery equipment, fishing tackle, boat gas, you name it. There's money flowing into this program to do all the great things for conservation in our country. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the woods or on the water next time. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.